So today we're going to talk about increases. There are times in a pattern where it will tell you to work to a certain point and then increase, and sometimes it just says increase and doesn't really give you an idea of what that increase is going to be. So I'm going to talk to you about yarn overs, knit front back, and make ones, and how and when to choose them. And while we talk about how and when, we're going to knit. So what I've done here is I've placed 3 stitches in the center with 2 stitch markers, and it is on the outside of those stitch markers that we're going to make those increases. This would be very common on like a spine of a shawl or raglan sleeves on a sweater. So the first thing we're going to do is a yarn over. Now some increases that you do will actually utilize a stitch, and some increases create a stitch out of nowhere. A yarn over creates a stitch out of nowhere. So I work all of my stitches up to that marker where I want to place my increase, and I just come over top of the needle, and that's a yarn over. I slip my marker, I knit my 3 that are inside that are not going to be changed. I slip my marker again, and at this point, out of nowhere, I create a stitch. So if I started with 20, I now have 22 stitches on this. As I work back in purl, you're going to see that as we come to those little yarn overs, they're just holes that we have created. In fact, if you think back to when you first started knitting, you probably did a whole slew of inadvertent yarn overs. That is very possible. All right, so right there, that is your actual yarn over. You're just coming in and purling it. And working our 3, notice that the stitches inside those markers did not change. Coming in here, find our yarn over, insert, and purl it. And that's a yarn over. So if we look at that when it's all said and done, we have 2 holes on either side of those 3 center stitches. So that's a yarn over increase. Okay, so I just went ahead and knitted it a little bit so you could see if you have multiple of the yarn overs, it's a really beautiful detail, but obviously it's a really noticeable increase. So if you were going for a lacy effect, this is a fantastic increase. If, however, you're working in places where you want to be a little bit sneakier and you don't want people to notice that you've made an increase, then you're going to choose something else. We're going to go ahead and do make ones next, because make ones, like a yarn over, also create a stitch out of nowhere. They are sometimes referred to as lifted bar increases as well, but it's a really easy and pretty one. Now we have make one right and make one left. They are right and left because a make one right leans to the right and a make one left leans to the left. So when you're working on increases, you want to decide, do you want your increases to lean where they would V together at the bottom or at the top? So if it's at the bottom, then you're going to make one right on the right and make one left on the left. If you want it the other way, you would actually make one left here and make one right here. So the easiest way to remember and make one right is you will lift the bar from the rear and you will then knit into the front. Whichever direction you lift the bar, you will knit opposite. If it is easy to get into this stitch, then you are doing it incorrectly. So I'm going to just do that one more time. On a make one right, I lift the bar that exists between those stitches from the back to the front, and I knit into the front of it, meaning this front leg right here. I'm going to come in knitwise and knit it. Again, now I have a little stitch I made out of nowhere. I'm going to go ahead and work my 3 stitches in the middle. I'm going to pop that little guy over, and I'm going to go ahead and work that one more time. Now I'm making a make one left. So this time I'm going to pick that bar up from the front to the back and knit into the back of the stitch. Again, these stitches should be a little bit difficult to get into. If they are really easy to get into, you basically are lifting it and making a yarn over, and you'll notice that you still have a hole in your knitting. I'm going to go ahead and purl back. When I make this next one, I'm going to go ahead and do it with throwing my yarn. It's a little harder for me, but I'm willing to do it for you guys. Okay, so if you're looking at where that make one is, it's right here. And it kind of, if you look at it, you can see that this stitch, this little thing that almost looks like a twisted stitch, starts where there's nothing below it. And that's what your make ones look like. That's your make one right, and that's your make one left. So I'm going to do it one more time, just throwing my yarn for those of you that struggle translating the continental knitting, which I can understand. And sorry, this is a lot slower process for me because I knit the other way. Okay, so we're going to come all the way up to this stitch, and again, I'm making this right exactly where my marker is because I'm placing it right where I want it. A make one leaning to the right is lifted from the rear and knit into the front, and I'm just going to come around and knit that stitch. Slip my marker, knit my 3, and a make one left is going to be picked up from the front to the back, right there, and knit into the back of the stitch. This is my little trick for getting into it because I find this to be more difficult. I just kind of rotate my needles right under and over, and I'm right where I need to be to do that. Okay, so I wanted to just show you what this really looks like. Again, these were our yarn over increases. You can see that they also make it a little bit wider when you do that. And then the make ones are the most invisible of the increases. So it's not the easiest thing to kind of see, but you've got an increase there, an increase there, and an increase there. And again, you can see a prominent lean to the right. And then on this side, you have your increase here, here, and here, and a prominent lean to the left. So if you are making like a raglan sweater and you don't want those increases to be noticeable, then this is an ideal increase. And very frankly, this is the increase I like to use on the front edge of a sweater. And inside the sweater, if I'm trying to make, add space for my bum or something, this is my favorite increase for that. But in terms of along a raglan edge, I like something that's a little visible. The yarn overs are too visible for me, so for me, like the happy medium is a knit front back, which I'm going to show you now. The other reason I love a knit front back is it's super easy. However, the other 2 increases that we've talked about do not utilize a stitch. The knit front back does. So you'll see I'm going to work to 1 stitch before my marker, and then I'm going to knit into the front and the back of that stitch. So I'm coming into the front, knitting like I normally would, pop my needle into the back leg of the stitch, and knit it again. That's a knit front back. I'm going to knit my 3 and show that to you one more time. Slowly as I can, you come into the front, wrap your yarn, come through, but don't take your stitch off the needle. Come into the back leg of that stitch, wrap around, and come through again. On the next side, I will show you that also in throwing so that you can see both. Just going to purl back and I'll meet you on the other side. Okay, so we are back to do the knit front back again, throwing our yarn. So I'm going to just insert, I'm going to knit over to again 1 stitch in front of the marker, not all the way to the marker because a knit front back utilizes an existing stitch. Okay, and I'm at that stitch. I'm going to come into the front, wrap my needle, take my needle into the back, wrap my needle, and come under. And you can see right here there's a little bar. This is often called not a lifted bar increase, but a bar increase because it leaves that little bar there. And coming to the other side, I'm going to go ahead and knit into the front, move around to the back, and knit into the back leg of the stitch. There's no purl involved in that. Sometimes when people do this, they think they have to somehow come into the stitch somewhere as if to purl, but you don't. It's just knitting into the front leg, knitting into the back leg. And I'm going to come back and show you what that looks like with a few of them worked. Okay, so I just worked another couple rows of the knit front back so you could see it. So again, this is your yarn over. This section right in here is your make one. And then these little bars on either side, bar, 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 is your knit front back. So depending on the detail that you're wanting to make, this is really nice. I want to point out one other thing. If you look at the spacing between your increases, your yarn overs, you obviously see there are 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3. Even between your make ones right there and right here, you see 1, 2, 3. Between the details of your knit front backs, however, this is my little bar. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is my bar. And that's because when I do a knit front back, I shift the bar to the left. So if you're doing a raglan sleeve and you actually want 3 stitch detail between your raglan stitches, raglan increases, you would actually have 2 stitches here, and you would do those knit front backs, and it would look like it's 3. If you want it to look like there's 4, then you have 3 stitches between your markers and you do your knit front backs on either side of the marker. So I hope that helps a little bit in terms of figuring out which one do I want to do, yarn over, make one, or knit front back. Thanks so much.